Hey everybody, Sue here from Sierra Sewing, Quilting, and Vacuums, and today we're going to make this cute little tote bag. So this is one actually Teresa did with the kids at kids camp, and I thought it turned out really cute, and there's just all kinds of endless possibilities for a really cute tote bag. We got this really fun Halloween fabric in, and I thought, oh, what a fun little trick-or-treat bag. So this one I'm going to make a little bit smaller, like child size, just to take around to go trick-or-treating. So we've got this, and I started with a ½ yard of my main bag fabric. I also have a ½ yard that I'm going to put as my lining on the inside. I always like to have a lighter fabric on the inside so I can see what's in my bag. If it's dark, it gets kind of shadowy. So I cut a piece. This is ½ yard by 15 inches. So I cut two 15-inch pieces for the inside and the outside, and I did the same thing for the lining. So I've got two 15 by 18-inch pieces for the lining as well. So there's a little bit left over on the side, so that I went ahead and I cut 3-inch pieces of that for my straps. I cut two straps. And then of the lining fabric, I had a little bit left over, so I'm gonna use this as a pocket. So we'll fold that in half, and that will be a pretty good sized pocket. Now for little kids, I think the pocket should be like on the inside in the lining, so that when the stuff falls out of the pocket, it falls into the bag and I don't have to worry about looking for it. But little kids love pockets. So anyway, we'll start with that. All right, so all I did was I folded my pocket piece, which was 6½ by 12. I just folded that in half, right sides together, and I sewed the left side up to the middle. I left a little gap here so that I can turn it, and then I picked it back up and sewed the other side. So now all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna trim my corners diagonally so I can get nice sharp points on my corners. So I'm cutting off close to the stitching line, but I sure don't wanna go into my stitching line because then I'll have a hole in my pocket. That would be very sad. All right, so I'm gonna take that. I hope I left a big enough hole to get my fingers in there. And I'm just gonna turn it right side out. And I got lucky because this fabric is not directional, so I don't have to worry about it being right side up or upside down because they're kind of going every direction on this. And there's my pocket, and I'm just gonna take my little, I call it a pokey thing. What's the official name?
Point trimmer.
Point trimmer.
A little bit more over the mouth.
Like so. I don't know, I think pokey thing's a good name. They should rename that. But that way I have nice sharp points on my pocket. I'm gonna press that really good, and when I do that, I just wanna make sure that this bottom edge that's still open is pressed under really close, so that when I sew it to my lining piece, when I sew that together, that's gonna close up the opening in my pocket. So let me press this really quick, and we will add that to our bag. All right. So I think it should be about 5 inches down from the top. So I'm gonna measure, I'm just gonna lay my ruler there. So 5 inches from the top, and I have 4 inches, 4 inches, about like that. What do you think? And I'm gonna pin that in place. And if you wanted to, you could do the same thing on the outside of the bag. I just think for little kids, it's safer to have pockets on the inside. But little kids love pockets. And I may just be an old child because I love pockets too. So we're gonna pin that in place. Now I always say this when we do our beginning sewing class, I always make a point to tell them not to sew this top part because then you won't be able to put anything in your pocket. And I say that jokingly, but always there's somebody that does that. So be really careful not to sew across that top seam Because you get on a roll and you kind of lose track of where you are. Just make sure that you keep that open so that you can put stuff in your pocket. All right, we'll move over to the sewing machine and do that really quick. Okay, so here we are at the sewing machine. This is what we call a bi-level foot. And what it is, it's got a little groove in the bottom so that I can butt that right up against the edge of my pocket, and it's gonna keep my stitching nice and straight. And then I move my needle position to the left. So if you have the capability, that'll just keep it nice and close to the edge of your fabric. Lower that on there, get that a little bit closer. So now when I sew, I want to keep this little red notch along the edge of my pocket. Ooh, that started off fast. Make sure you reverse, and I'm going to actually go back and forth a couple times on that one just to keep it secure, because that pocket's going to get some wear and tear, I'll bet. And then as I sew, I just want to keep the edge of my pocket along that little red groove. And that's going to keep me perfectly straight. And just don't forget that this is still open down here, so I just want to be really careful that that's all tucked in as I sew across that. And that looks really good. I can still hear my home ec teacher's voice in my ears all these years later. Never sew over pins. All right, so there's my pocket, and I didn't forget to sew the top edge, so I'm good. Okay, so now I've got my bag front and my bag back, and I just cut a piece of fusible fleece that's the same size as the front and back pieces. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna lay it with the fusible fleece bumpy side up, and I'm gonna put my main bag front and back pieces right on top of that. And I'm just gonna take my hot iron, follow your manufacturer's instructions, but I'm just gonna fuse that down. I just wanna be really careful I don't get the sole plate of my iron against that bumpy side of that fleece, or I will have goo on my iron and I will not be happy. But I'm just gonna take that in each of the sections. I'm gonna hold my iron down there 3 or 4 seconds, just enough to adhere that fleece to the bag. Just takes a few seconds, but then I'm dealing with 1 piece instead of 2, and it just makes life a whole lot easier. So just like that, and now again, this piece is sealed to the edge of this. And I'm gonna do that for my front and again for my back. So I've already done that for the back side. It's ready to go. Then the next piece I am gonna cut for my straps. I cut these about 15 inches. This is what we kind of determined was the perfect size for a little kid. And I took a 1-inch strip, it's 1 inch by 15 inch strip of the fusible fleece. I took my strap piece, again, we cut that 3 inches by 15, and I just kind of folded down one side, about a 1/4 inch, so that I don't have a raw edge on the outside. And I'm gonna take the bumpy side of my fleece, and I'm gonna put the bumpy side against the wrong side of my fabric. And then I kind of folded this over so that that fold meets pretty close to the edge of my fabric, and I'm gonna fuse that in place. Again, I don't want my iron to touch that bumpy part of that fusible fleece, so I'm being super careful that doesn't happen. And then I can just go up and fold in the other side and tuck in my strap. Then I'm gonna take this to the sewing machine, and I'm gonna use that same bi-level foot, and I'm gonna sew along each edge of my strap, just like I did on the pocket. I'm just gonna sew my strap edges down, and they will be ready to add to my bag. Okay, so I've got both of my straps done now. Again, all I did was I took that bi-level foot and I stitched along both of those edges, So that gives me a nice firm little strap, and the fusible fleece is just about the right weight, so it gives it a little bit of oomph in there without it being too stiff. So now I'm gonna add this to the top of my bag front. So what I wanna do is I'm gonna find the middle, and this looks like it is 15 inches, so about 7.5 here is gonna be the center. And I always figure I want my handles to be about 6 inches apart from edge to edge. So I'm gonna say from my center point, I'm gonna measure out 3 inches, and I'm gonna put one side of that here. Oh, I had pins a minute ago, what did I do with them? Sorry, technical difficulty. Got my pins, and I'm just gonna pin that there. And again, I like the tips of my handles to be about 6 inches apart. So I will measure 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and put another pin there. And I'll do the same thing on the back side. And then I'm just gonna take this to my sewing machine. Now, when I'm sewing with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, I want this to be inside of that. So when I sew my bag to my lining, I'm gonna sew with the 1/2 inch seam allowance. So this time I'm gonna do a skinny seam, so more like a 1/4, so that thread isn't gonna show up when I get my lining on there. So I'm gonna take this to the sewing machine. I'm just going to do a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm gonna go back and forth and back, so that'll be nice and secure, and I'm gonna do that on both sides for both the front and the back. So I'll be right back. Okay, so now I have my 2 lining pieces, one that has the pocket, and I'm gonna take those, and again, I'm gonna sew the 3 sides together, leaving the top open so that I can add that to the main bag body. And I'm just gonna sew that just like we have been, 1/2 inch seam allowance. Just double check, make sure you reverse stitch that really good. Come on. I didn't want to go. Just like that. And then I'm gonna do the very same thing with the main part of the bag. Just make sure I got the right sides inside, and you just want to make sure that the straps are on the inside there. Make sure that they don't get caught in sewing the side seams, because again, then you get to play with that seam ripper, and that's no fun. What do you think? So this one, I think, I want this bag to be able to stand up, so we're gonna do what we call boxing the bottom. So let's do that next. Okay. All right, so now I'm gonna take my corner and I'm just gonna pull that apart. And I am going to kind of wiggle it around until these seams match. And then I'm gonna pin that together. And you have to decide how big you want your box to be. So let's see, I'm going to, my bag's not cooperating. And I'm gonna say about 1.5 inches from the corner here. And all I'm doing is lining up a line on my ruler with the seam line that I just sewed. And I got my 1.5 inch point here. This is on my stitching line, and I am just gonna draw my corner mark. Stick another pin in there so that holds. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, and then I'm going to repeat that with the lining, okay? So here I am at the machine, and I'm just going to sew diagonally across this line that I just marked. There we go, just like that. I've already done the other side, and you'll do this very same thing. Sew those across on the lining. Then next I'm just going to trim off that extra corner. Okay. All right, so now I've got my lining, and you see I've got my little boxy bottoms there, so that's going to help it stand up. I'm going to insert that inside my tote bag. So my tote bag is still wrong side out, and I want to make sure those handles are all the way stuffed inside. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert the lining inside of the bag, and I'm just going to match it up at the seams. I'm going to take that, and I'm going to pin it all the way around the top. And the trick here is I need to leave a little section open so that I can turn it. And I usually pick one side and do in between the straps on that, and just when I sew, I'm going to start here, I'm going to sew around, I'm going to stop here, leave that little section open so that I can turn it right side out. So give me just a second and we will get that pin. Okay, so I've sewn around the top, again leaving this little area in between the straps open. Now the moment of truth. Pull it right side out. And there's my lining. I'm just going to stuff that lining back inside of there. And look, the straps are actually on the outside. Everybody doubts that when I have them sewn with the straps on the inside. But when you turn it, they come right back out. Just like so. I'm going to get my corners together. So I'm going to press it really good. And when I do that, I'm going to just make sure that this opening here, again, fold that together, kind of like what we did in our pocket. And then our last step is that I'm going to come back around with that bi-level top stitch foot, and I'm going to do a little top stitch, and that's going to do two things. That's going to keep that lining in place and close up my little opening here. So one last thing, and then we'll have a finished bag. What do you think? All right, so here it is, the finished bag. I've top stitched around that top edge, and again, that sealed up the opening where I turned it, and it kind of keeps the lining intact. Got my cute little pocket on the inside. I got my bag bottom, so it'll stand up. I can get lots of candy in that one. But it's also big enough I can put my flashlight in my little pocket, all that good stuff. So there it is. What do you think? I think it's pretty fun. All right, thanks so much, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.